The heralds of the eons themselves, the most powerful individuals in the universe, Emanators. It has been a while since I made my last video talking about the Emanators of Honkai Star Rail, and obviously a lot has changed. But that's the interesting thing. Yes, we've learned about a lot more Emanators, but just how ambiguous this term actually is even within the game's own lore. Yes, we've come to typically know Emanators to be emissaries of the Eon's will, handpicked by the Eon to draw a massive amounts of power to basically represent that Eon, while Pathstriders can simply only draw a portion of that power. But even in the game with people like Herda that are among the smartest people in the entire universe, they are still trying to figure out what an Emanator actually means and what it is, because each Eon is vastly different in how they go about having Emanators, and their attitudes towards them. Herda herself has even mentioned beings that have Emanator level powers. And there are Eons that theoretically should not even have Emanators because of their principles, and yet, here we are. We've also since learned that there are individuals in this game that will become an Emanator in different iterations of the timeline and past timelines, if the future projects in a certain way. So not only are we going to talk about the Emanators that are confirmed, but the characters that are in the realm of Emanator, and I want to discuss that as well. Because even Herda herself has used the term Emanator level power. And we've definitely seen characters that can rival that of an Emanator, whether we know they are one or not. And I figure there's no better place than to start with the Genius Society and the Emanators of Erudition. It only makes sense to start with the first ever genius, the guy that created the Aeon itself, Xandar I Kuwabara. If there was anyone worthy to be an Emanator of an Aeon, it would be the person that created said Aeon. What started out for Xandar is gaining knowledge, learning about the secrets of the universe by creating an astral supercomputer. He built a computer that can extrapolate itself to no end, that ascended to Aeonhood immediately, solving the universe itself and the ultimate questions, which means it gatekept the universe, now putting the universe in what is called the Cave of Ignorance. Achieving complete singularity knowledge, once this computer became an Aeon, it immediately made Xandar its first ever Emanator and first ever member of the Genius Society. Xandar would immediately regret his decision, now creating a computer that gatekeeps knowledge of the universe and all its secrets, and would immediately propose a plan to now destroy it. Xandar also realized that, because he himself created this Aeon, he is among the biggest threats of the universe, so near the end of his lifespan, he fragmented himself into 9 thought fragments, wanting to undo his mistake of shackling humanity, coding his consciousness into 9 vessels. One of these 9 fragments would become Lygus, with the task of destroying this Aeon by any means necessary. Xandar really is one of the most prestigious characters in the game. He immediately nerfed himself after creating an Aeon and becoming an Emanator. Next, we have none other than Herda, Genius Society member number 83, and she is currently the most active member of the Genius Society today. Herda was born on an oceanic planet known as the Blue, which the Herda space station orbits to this day, known to have the highest IQ recorded on her home planet, and she saved her home planet from destruction 19 times against the Antimatter Legion. Interestingly enough though, her space station originally started as a warehouse to collect curios, but eventually evolved into a scientific research hub, with one of her greatest achievements, the simulated universe, to simulate the Aeons and ask them questions about the unknown. Naturally, Herda was gifted at a young age, but she did not become an Emanator until she solved the solitary waves theory, a theory that was presented by News themselves that people could not solve for generations. A theory that monitors the constants of the universe, monitoring if they're below or above the index, which can mean the universe's projected future can be predetermined or it's chaotic and unpredictable. Since then, she's had many achievements. Most notably, she's created 1 million puppets for herself, technically 281, most of which look like her as a child. She has also created some de-aging technology for herself because she is far older than she looks. She is anywhere between 800 and almost 2,000 years old. She is also very close with the Intellitron Screwlum, working very closely with him and Stephen Lloyd on the simulated universe. And probably one of the craziest things Herta's ever done very recently is change the fourth instant of news. These instants are pivotal moments calculated by this Aeon that anchor the future of the universe, like the first instant being the Border Star Trade War, the second instant being Rupert I awakening, the third instant being when Polka Kakamon assassinated Rupert, and the fourth instant was the birth of Iron Tomb, signaling the start of the war among the Aeons. But Herta was able to change it with the help of us, the Trailblazer. But as shown in an alternate reality, Herta would have tried to connect herself to news like Rupert did, but rather than change the instant, she would have become the new Mechanical Emperor. So it's a damn good thing we were in Amphorius. And the last of the currently known emanators of erudition is Dr. Primitive, Genius Society member number 64. Dr. Primitive is a good example of, you don't have to be good or bad, it doesn't matter. As long as you align with that Aeon, you can get their blessing. Because Aeons don't discriminate between good and evil or right or wrong. Dr. Primitive is somebody that will pursue knowledge for the sake of knowledge despite who or what he hurts. He is known as an intergalactic criminal and a major antagonist, especially with the likes of the Galaxy Rangers. Why can't Ashveil pay this guy a visit? Dr. Primitive believes that civilization is a shackle that prevents true evolution, and his main goal is to return the universe to its primitive roots, regressing advanced civilizations to their primitive states. And like demonstrated in Penacony, he loves to transform inhabitants into apes. But we also know he has research labs with dedicated scientists experimenting on people, creating super soldiers, advanced robotics, or primitive life forms. These laboratories were called forests, and they abducted people to experiment on. Rappa is one of the few people that actually survived, becoming one of the more powerful people they've ever created. But he is also known for some pretty incredible academic achievements that granted him the status of Emanator, such as his gravity capture technology. Even the Intelligentsia Guild is trying to replicate his work to this day. The anti-gravity shoes. Apparently he uses these shoes to avoid capture by leaving no traces. And his different mimetic viruses. Using this powerful virus, like he did at Paperfold University in Penacony, to hypnotize his victims and mess with people's cognitive abilities. Currently his whereabouts are unknown since he's always running from the law. Herta refuses to work with him, and the Galaxy Rangers are always hunting him. Since Rappa, a Galaxy Ranger right now, was one of his test subjects, her entire life's mission is to hunt the evil ninja Osaru. But that's all we really know. The only other person I can think of as of right now that is in contention or is secretly an emanator of erudition is Polka Kakamon. She has had some incredible feats in this game. Using the butterfly effect, she is Genius member number 4, the one responsible of killing the original Xandar 1 Kuwabara. Now we know he set this up on purpose so that his other 9 fragments could go undetected while they try to kill News. What a clever bastard. She's responsible for killing Xandar obviously, but also Rupert I, Genius number 27, who could have become the Aeon of Destruction himself if not shackled by the circle of knowledge News created. She also killed members number 7 and 8, and she was able to kill Rupert I despite the intervention of multiple Aeons. Polka believes that the circle of knowledge should be protected, and anyone that gets too close to the border should be eliminated, because breaking outside News' circle of knowledge will accelerate the universe's descent into finality. Polka Kakamon also scribed out her face throughout the timeline so no one can identify her. She can kill you at any point in time, manipulating the butterfly effect, and you never see her coming. Man, she is terrifying. There's a pretty good reason why every genius is terrified of her. But ultimately we do not know if she's an emanator, but she definitely has emanator level powers. She's definitely on par with them, so I thought she was worth a mention. Next, we have none other than the Black Sun Aeon, IX of Nihility, and the one and only known emanator of Nihility, and obviously we've talked about this before. Acheron is obviously a unique case because Nihility itself represents endless nothingness and meaninglessness. This Aeon does not associate itself with anything, therefore, in theory it should not really pick Emanators. Plus, it being a bottomless black hole, an Emanator theoretically should have endless power it can draw from, making them extremely dangerous. And that is the unique case we find ourselves with Acheron. Acheron is meant to be the multiversal counterpart of Raiden Mei and the Raiden Shogun. 3 characters that all suffer from tragedy. Acheron specifically comes from a planet known as Izumo, which had a sister planet named Takamagara. There was godlike kami creatures on Takamagara that one day attacked her planet of Izumo, due to the encroachment of the black sun that is Nihility. Most of her people were slaughtered, but they were able to take the dead remains of these dead kame gods and create 12 edict edges, 12 swords forged by the dead gods. Eventually though, these 12 swords were fused into one final sword known as Origin, wielded by Acheron as the sole survivor of her world, where she then challenged the Nihility itself. Unfortunately though, both planets were swallowed up by the black sun and manifestation of IX, and there's obviously a lot of speculation on how Acheron became an Emanator. And personally, I think IX is an Aeon that you don't become an Emanator by being chosen, but you have to take it. You have to indulge and dive into the shadow that is IX. Embrace the shadow, become a self-annihilator, and embrace a life of non-existence. In this, you lose your sense of self, but somehow Acheron has found a way to revel in this situation. Embrace her fate. She really is meant to be the character that always suffers in any iteration or multiverse. But the worst part about it is that Acheron is the worst export version of this character. She loses everyone and everything, and yet still finds meaning in nothingness. She would eventually become a false Galaxy Ranger posing to be one of them, where we eventually meet her in Penacony, not before she killed Duke Inferno though and took his invitation. There is easily an argument that Acheron could be among the most powerful Emanators in the game, simply because she serves an Aeon that doesn't choose you. You embrace it, giving you theoretically an endless black hole of power to draw from, with an Aeon that doesn't regulate it. We've also seen her use the powers to cut through the fabric of reality and dimensions, even cut through metaphysical concepts. It is even said that she can cut through the meaning of existence itself. And I mean, it kinda does prove this that we got a glimpse of her even in Amphorius when we died, in a simulation. I mean, just look what happens when a memo keeper tries to peek into the Nihility. Instant regret, I bet. But, besides Acheron, we don't know any other Emanators of Nihility. The game hints towards maybe some other unnamed self-annihilators, but we just simply don't know. You're all probably wondering about Zephyro, one of the Lord Ravagers that's known as the White Sun. It's linked with Nihility, and don't worry, we'll talk about the Lord Ravagers and their unique circumstance later in the video. Moving on now to the Preservation. You know, it's kind of interesting talking about the Preservation's Emanators because there's only 2 that we know of. For an Aeon that's been around this long, and an organization as big as the IPC, you'd think we'd have more. Obviously, there's Diamond, who is the leader of the Strategic Investment Department. He is also the leader of the 10 Stonehearts. Diamond is currently a P47 rank within the IPC, but naturally his ambitions are to keep increasing his rank. And to be honest, we really don't know anything about Diamond because everything we do know about him is by extension of the 10 Stonehearts, because Diamond has gifted a fraction of his Emanator powers, gifting one of these cornerstones to these 10 individuals, and they do his bidding throughout the cosmos, like sending Aventurine to Penacony, having members like Opal, Obsidian, and Jade be among the leaders of the Stonehearts. But all of them are hand-picked, with unique individual traits that can fit into pretty much any circumstance, like we see now with Pearl in Planarcadia. We do know it's also frowned upon to break your cornerstone like Aventurine did with his fight with Acheron and Penacony, but it was ultimately left up to a vote to the 10 Stonehearts. The only other confirmed Emanator of Preservation is Taravan Kane. He is the head of the Building Material Logistics Department. He is actually a P48 member, so he's actually ranked higher than Diamond. We also don't know much about him either, other than he's unsympathetic, uncompromising, and willing to prioritize market dynamics over fairness or affordability to others. And interestingly enough, despite being an emanator of preservation and being the head of the building material logistics department, whose primary goal is to transport materials to Klipoth, the game suggests that it's unknown whether he truly follows the preservation. He's also been described to be a bit of a bigger man, so a little bit overweight and a bit of a glutton, which naturally has me thinking maybe he doesn't follow the preservation, but maybe he's an emanator of a different path. But I'm not going to get too ahead of myself yet. As for any remaining emanators of preservation, there's some speculation whether some other board members or high-ranking IPC members are, but nothing confirmed. I also wondered if there'd be some architects out there that were. I think Elisa Rand could have been a good candidate, considering she got a lance straight from the Aeon itself, but I think if she was an emanator she could have stopped the Antimatter Legion without having to wake up a Stellaron. But that's just my speculation. Now, since we were talking about Terra Vancane, I want to talk about Ouroboros of Ferocity. This one is interesting because we're slowly learning more about this Aeon now in Planarcadia. And there is actually 0 confirmed emanators of this path. I wondered if that was the true path Terra Vancane follows, based off not only his gluttonous personality and the fact that the game doesn't even know if he follows the preservation. We also know the IPC has a lot of traits that follow the Ferocity. Their eagerness to obtain new planets, resources, and their obsession with growing. Until it's proven otherwise, I will always believe that the IPC has a Trojan horse Ferocity problem. And it would be kind of an interesting twist that one of their main emanators was actually following Ouroboros all along. It doesn't surprise me though that this Aeon has no emanators that we know of, since this Aeon has been missing since the Swarm disaster. And I have a gut feeling that in Planarcadia we're going to learn exactly why and where it's been. Speaking of emanators though, we need to talk about the leader of the Galaxy Rangers, La Mancha, or ashveil, who himself is probably a follower of the Hunt. But we definitely know that that shadow in his arm is definitely linked to the Veracity. I mean, just look how it devours those wannabe Power Rangers in Planarcadia. And then La Mancha describes how it tastes like the abundance. This isn't even subtle. But the craziest part was Pearl revealing that this shadow is responsible for killing not just 1, but 2 eons. Emanators. Shahu of Abundance and Zulo, the Lord Ravager the Galaxy Rangers defeated to get glory and fame. That is actually insane. I am dying to know what this shadow in his arm actually is. And obviously we can all see with our eyes, even if it's not an emanator of Veracity, it's clearly as strong as one. Actually stronger, since it devoured 2. But other than that, other than some Leviathans probably in the distant past, we don't know of any other potential emanators of the Veracity. Ho-Oh of Equilibrium's another interesting one because we also don't know any other confirmed emanators of this path either. The game only describes very vague arbitrators that work throughout the cosmos to maintain the universe's balance. And yet, we haven't seen them yet. Even in Amphorius with Iron Tomb, they didn't show up. But I think that's because this Aeon and their followers stay low-key. As long as the universe is balanced, for better or worse, I don't think it really matters. They don't have anyone that goes into the public eye, or is widely recognized. They are beings described of abandoning their identity to the web of logic to embody the concept of equilibrium itself. And the only time we've ever had run-ins with the arbitrators is when we ascend on our account level, do our ascension quest. We did talk to an arbitrator for those, and I think because they were directly talking to the main MC, us with the potential to be Acheveil themselves, an ex-Stellaron hunter, I think it's very plausible that we were talking to an emanator of equilibrium. Next, we have Xipe of Harmony. You know, that Aeon that created the Stellarons? Xipe only has 4 emanators. Well, actually technically 3 now. And they're the 4 harmonic strings. This is an Aeon that has an interesting circumstance for the emanators because any of the family members that can tune one of the harmonic strings can temporarily become an emanator of harmony. So technically any of the family members, by extension of the harmonic strings. And I mean, we know Xipe as an Aeon is very biblical. It's all about unity, everyone being part of one hive mind, which perfectly fits the MO of the Stellaron that can talk to the victims, manipulate them like it did with Cocolia. These 4 harmonic strings are meant to be facets of Xipe, used in the name of the harmony and the family. There is Elenev, the commander of the Eternal Centurion, which was actually discussed in 3.8 when we revisited Penacony. When this harmonic string of harmony is mobilized or summoned, it typically means the family is going to war, under one cohesive force, and the defeated enemies get assimilated into the family. Elenev of the Eternal Centurion was basically the family's war machine, not meant to be used against one strong individual, but meant for war, against armies, and has even fought against the Antimatter Legion to the point where they tried to avoid the planet of festivities. Now, when Zulo died to that shadow in Ashveil's arm, Nanook personally destroyed the planet where the Eternal Centurion was stationed. And from the ashes of this Emanator of Harmony, Nanook created Selenova to then lead his army, which is kind of fitting. He went and took the family's best war machine and made it his war machine. Now Selenova, well, let's not talk about Selenova yet. We haven't got to that point yet in the video. The second harmonic string is Beatrice, the merrymaker of the blissful ball. And I'll be honest with you, we don't know anything about this harmonic string. But they did reference this harmonic string in the trailer for Planarcadia. Go ahead and listen.
When has Harmony's dance needed preservation's guidance?
The blissful ball need not grace us. When I head to Astropolis, I'll uncover what the IPC truly thinks.
Now, we might not know a lot, but we can make some assumptions. A merrymaker is a person enjoying themselves in a very lively way, mostly associated with dancing, drinking, or partying. Naturally, this fits the theme of Elation perfectly, and from what we can see, there's a girl dancing, probably another branch or planet with different family members, talking about how they don't need the IPC. Then Robin alludes to how they don't need this harmonic string, that she'll take care of it in Astropolis. Now, what is Astropolis? Well, we know this whole chapter dealing with the Elation's gonna last, like Amphorius, pretty much the whole extent of the 4.0 series. I think we're gonna finish up in Planarcadia halfway through, and then move on to Astropolis when this story progresses. And that's where we're gonna enter the second phase of this whole chapter, and possibly the family, maybe even this harmonic string. But other than that, that's all we know. I just thought it was interesting and very subtle that they actually referenced it though in the trailer. There is also Constantina, the singer of the Pan-Acoustic Theater. Now again, we don't really know much about this harmonic string either, but I think this one is meant to symbolize virtue and a bit of manipulation, because again, there's a lot of religious aspects about the family and Xipe. The way this whole faction works as one hive mind, kind of like a religion, where no one's really able to go against the grain or buck the system. Even in war, in armies, or in the family, there must be complete unity. Something tells me this harmonic string might have something to do with the Stellaron's very manipulative aspects and qualities. But that's just my speculation. And then lastly, the harmonic string Sunday used in Penacony is Dominicus, the wisher of the harmonious choir. So does that mean that Sunday became an emanator of the harmony, temporarily? I mean, for starters, it would have probably been the Order, but no, that guy almost turned himself into a brand new Aeon. This harmonic string, though, is primarily used for family gatherings, celebration, to sing and bless everlasting peace. I guess to balance war, you have to have peace, so they can sing and pray to their Aeon. But during the Penacony saga, when Sunday usurped Dominicus's power, compromising it with the Order, everyone in Asdana fell into Enna's dream, turning everyone into the puppets of Enna, which then changed Dominicus's shape and form to be the harmonious choir of the great Septimus, and then eventually the embryo of philosophy. While I'm talking about the harmony, I'm just going to talk about the Order too, because this Aeon is gone. It was assimilated by the harmony. There are obviously no known emanators of Order, especially current game, but even in the past, we don't know of any. There probably were some, but Sunday was the closest thing we're ever going to get to an emanator of the Order. it really does put into perspective why this Aeon was absorbed by Harmony. In a lot of ways, Harmony does have so many aspects that revolve order and control, but in a much more broad, manipulative, cohesive hive mind-like state. Enna of Order is all about turning people into puppets and controlling them, keeping order. But the Harmony is about turning people into puppets, but making them willing to do so. I just thought that was interesting to point out. Those are the 4 emanators of the Harmony, and whatever we're gonna get from the Order. Moving on now to the Elation. And that's all we have for the Elation now. Moving on to the Elation. And that's all we have for the Elation. Now moving on to, wait a minute. This one is actually pretty interesting because there are some confirmed emanators of this path, but also one I want to talk about. First, let's start with this Nobilis worm, which pretty much died immediately when becoming an emanator. Aha was just doing this for some laughs. Apparently some unnamed masked fools in the past or at some point in time. But there's 2 individuals I really want to talk about that have massive potential. The game already teased Silverwolf's acquaintance, somebody else that's a genius hacker and can ether edit from the planet Punklord. The IPC had already suspected that she might be an emanator of Elation, and they used Zero's ether editing technology to revive Planarcadia from a painting. That's probably why they initially thought she might be an emanator. And honestly, some people still think she is. It's not confirmed she isn't yet. The Imaginee energy stems from Aha themselves. Saved Planarcadia long ago when it was known as Ahatopia, from the Antimatter Legion attack, using the Imaginee energy stemming from Aha. So the fact that somebody could revive this world from a painting through editing reality itself is kinda substantial. There could be an argument for Himiko's ancestor to potentially be an emanator of Elation, but I think they would have told us if she was. I think the closest person we have in-game right now to be an emanator of this path is Silverwolf. Silverwolf at base form is already one of the more powerful beings in the entire cosmos. The world's greatest hacker that even competes with the geniuses. The IPC can't put a lid on her. And at the end of the day, she's a teenager, a gamer, that views life as her playground in one gigantic game. That sounds exactly like Aha of Elation. Now we're getting a new form for Silverwolf, level 99. She's getting a massive upgrade, but also, even looking at her kit that's now leaked, I'm not going to show anything, but she also breaks the 4th wall like this Aeon. She has Pac-Man and the sword from Minecraft in her kit. If they already thought Zero might be an emanator of Elation, then why wouldn't Silverwolf be in contention? She fits the MO perfectly. I also think Silverwolf, now knowing how Planarcadia was revived from a painting, she might be the key to reviving Amphorius from the book I have written. But that's my best candidate for the truest potential emanator of Elation. Besides the fact that Aha, as unpredictable as this Aeon is, could really make anyone or anything an emanator on a whim. So look out. Next, for Adrilla, the Aeon of Beauty. This Aeon is presumed deceased, and obviously, as you'd expect, there are no current known emanators of this path, although they suspect some members of the Mirror Holders group that follow this Aeon, or the Knights of Beauty, there might be emanators among them. Besides that, we have no idea and have no leads. The only thing I can speculate on about this is that I think this Aeon, Adrilla, was also absorbed from Shipe of Harmony, making it one of the 3 faces. But that's just my guess. Argenti might be the only one that we can even speculate that's possibly even remotely an emanator of Adrilla, but that Aeon doesn't exist, it's dead. But like I already stated, I speculate that maybe the Harmony's 3rd face is the Beauty, and you know what, Argenti kinda just finds himself here in Penacony during 3.8 randomly. Kinda weird, no? He could be connected to Adrilla the same way Sunday was to the Order through Harmony. As for Tazeroth of Propagation, as this path suggests, this Aeon did have, in fact, quite a few emanators in its heyday. This Aeon really did ascend guns a-blazing, sparking the whole universe in one of its biggest, largest catastrophes to date, and as fast as it came, it went, being destroyed by the preservation and the intervention of multiple eons. The only known and confirmed emanator of this path is Scaracabes, known as the Star Crusher Swarm King, often described as one of the nightmares across the galaxy, and it had a death ray that could fragment celestial bodies and planets, shattering stars while producing offspring. Ranmei describes it as being primitive and pure, functioning completely on instincts rather than ulterior motives, political means, or manipulation. That is why she chose to revive it and try to clone it in the Herta space station, which was an absolute terrible idea. But despite there being quite a few emanators of propagation during the swarm disaster, we don't know any others that were confirmed. But I'm gonna go on the limb here and state that maybe this monstrosity might have been an emanator, maybe. And the only current potential one I could see is Ranmei herself, since she has an obsession with creating life. But ultimately I think her path might lead her somewhere else, becoming an emanator or even an eon itself of creation. Those geniuses really just don't know when to leave well enough alone. Have they learned nothing from Xandar? Next, we have Fully of Remembrance, and probably the most interesting one to talk about in my opinion because we've learned a lot about this eon with the introduction of Amphorius. What we learned about Fully of Remembrance is that they're not even around yet, they don't exist. They are born at the end of the timeline. Since we know the Honkai Star Rail universe is in somewhat of a causality time loop, with the trailblaze and the finality being the anchors. But we've always known that Fully of Remembrance is meant to record all things and all history, so when the universe is destroyed, it can be reborn and restarted with the memory of the past loop. Knowing all this now makes so much more sense. But it does seem weird that an eon that doesn't even exist yet would have emanators in the current game. How does that even work? Well, it's because Fully projects itself into the past, being the eon of remembrance. But I guess because the current universe is in a causality loop, Fully's future is technically its past. And when the timeline restarts and Fully's body is shattered, it creates crystallized cocoons for different pink-haired individuals known as the pure children of Anasrava. And Anasrava actually means uncontaminated or pure, which actually fits perfectly because these crystallized cocoons all house individuals that are born from Fully's shattered divine corpse. And all these women are from vastly different birthplaces, races, identities, and life experiences. And exactly how many of them there are, we don't exactly know. Also, all these emanators of remembrance have the potential to create dreamscapes of memoria. And there are only 2.5 of them that we know about so far. First being Cyrene from Amphorius. Funny enough, actually, a little Easter egg, the term Cyrene is actually used in Greek mythology for blended historical records, and her being an emanator and child of remembrance fits perfectly. But the Cyrene we know in Honkai Star Rail, her origin is a bit hard to explain, because she was cultivated inside a scepter ME13 during 13.3 million different cycles. Her original incarnation, Philia 039, integrated into the scepter, her persona was that of a Chrysos heirs linked with Auronics of Time, when her and Phainon then would initiate a time loop to prevent the birth of the Emanator of Destruction Iron Tomb. She would then manifest a Memo sprite known as Mem, which was obviously a regressed Memo sprite of herself. Then there's the Demiurge, the 13th Titan, and the Heart of Amphorius, where she stored and uploaded, I guess technically, the millions of cycles and memories that have taken place, eventually allowing the Demiurge to manifest into her final form that we see before we battle Iron Tomb. The sad part about Cyrene though is, because we've had different time loops of the universe before, we know if she ascends at the end of the universe to become Fully, it leads to one of the 4 finality outcomes foresaw by Elio and the Stellaron Hunters. So she has to sacrifice herself for the happy ending, and defeat the Lord Ravager Iron Tomb. By remaining in the current trapped reality that is Amphorius, by being Amphorius' anchor, reliving the story over and over again and trapping Iron Tomb within this infinite loop. Because to be anchored, there must be a constant gaze of the remembrance. And then because Amphorius is trapped within its own mini-causality loop now, she actually becomes the Fully of Amphorius, When we were gazed by Fully back in 3.0, that was Cyrene version of Fully, which is very interesting. Sadly, she'll be trapped there forever because if she was ever freed from that loop, that iteration of the timeline would collapse. Next, of course, we have March 7th, whose origin we only knew all the way back in 1.0 as being found by the Astral Express encased in ice, with her camera, but we knew nothing else besides that. Fun fact about March 7th, her name is March 7th because that's the date they found her. And you know what's funny, like 2 years ago I actually predicted that she was gonna be the Aeon Fully. I guess I was kind of right, but kind of wrong at the same time. But the difference with March 7th is we don't really know too much about her. We already know what happens if Cyrene becomes Fully, but we don't know what happens if March 7th does. Has she ever become Fully before in one of the time loops? Or is she meant to be a new attempt? Is that why she was found by the Astral Express? This is all orchestrated, us being guided by the Stellaron Hunters to avoid the Finality. Right now on the Astral Express we're carrying around a potential Eon of Remembrance in March 7th, so that if we do reach the Finality, at least we have somebody that can take the universe's memories and we can restart. March 7th does really feel like a contingent to have with us. But you notice I said we have 2.5? That's because there's Evernight, March 7th's alter ego. The reason I say half is because obviously Evernight is technically an emanator level power of the Remembrance, but we know that she's also connected to the enigmata. This one is interesting as well because Mythos goes hand in hand with the Remembrance but also counters the erudition, trying to conjure the fog of thought, that things should be left unanswered and the universe not predetermined so that it can flow organically. And the origin of this Aeon is kind of unknown, but Herta speculates that the path of the enigmata was born from the Remembrance. Now ain't that interesting, considering March 7th is a fragment of Fully's shattered celestial body. Evernight is a manifestation of the enigmata within March 7th's own body, acting as her protector, using the power of oblivion to hide March 7th's painful past. There might be a very specific reason why March 7th can't remember, and that actually fits Mythos' MO perfectly. And Evernight described by Herta as an emanator level power within Amphorius, kind of interesting. But even crazier that this Evernight persona uses the Remembrance emanator power to fuel the enigmata within her. I mean, it's not completely off the table that Evernight could be Mythos, or a direct avatar of their will, since they're born from the same place, representing a hidden truth for Mythos. For every perfectly preserved memory of the Remembrance, there must also be a shadow of what is forgotten and rewritten. Obviously we know March 7th fell into a coma after reaching Amphorius, and then Evernight emerges, takes control of her body. She wants to use the power of oblivion within the Remembrance to reshape Amphorius and erase and rewrite memories to prevent a catastrophe, which I guess is fair. And by doing all this, she becomes a big part of Amphorius' actual loop and history, with the whole geographical region named after her, Evernight. And she kept the world-bearing core flame nice and out of the hands of Lygus, to assist in keeping Iron Tomb dormant and never reaching completion. Personally speaking, I thought it was a nice twist to have Evernight in Amphorius because that chapter was dealing with a lot of concepts of the erudition, memory, data, running a simulation, but how memory seeps into that, with the Remembrance's involvement. Mythos kind of counters both. Because the enigmata was born from the Remembrance, Evernight can effectively run the enigmatic software or powers on her high-level emanator powers of Remembrance. So the two go hand in hand, because the Remembrance and the enigmata are both reliant on the cognition of the brain, remembering and forgetting. Ultimately, I'm going to say here that it's like 99% confirmed that Evernight is in fact an emanator of the enigmata. Whether Mythos planted this Trojan horse within the Fully time loop to always be a part of March 7th in the Astral Express, who can say? If Amphorius is really meant to resemble the outside world, Cyrene then kind of losing her memories becoming Mem while keeping this endless loop going, maybe that's why March 7th can't retain her memories. It would be too painful to know her real purpose. She's kind of like the Cyrene of the actual universe, and that makes it so much more sad. The game alludes to maybe potentially some other history fictionologists that could be potential emanators, but nothing confirmed. When we're dealing with Mythos, I'm sure it's always going to be pretty wishy-washy. Just kind of fits the Aeon, you know? Next, we have a big one. The Shenzhou Alliance and the Arbiter Generals, the Emanators of the Hunt. And this Aeon does work a little bit unique among the others. There always seems to be debate whether the Arbiter Generals are in fact Emanators of the Hunt. Lawn of the Hunt kind of grants that power to whoever holds the position of General. So it's not necessarily that the individual is, but rather whoever holds that position. Obviously, we've seen that they can summon a Lux Arrow from Lawn themselves. We saw Feixiao do this. And we recently saw Yaoguang threaten to do this in 4.1 to Evanescia. And she wanted none of that smoke. But it isn't just that they can summon Lawn's power directly, but they're all granted a specific title and a special spiritus associated with each general. And to boot, each Arbiter General, despite following the hunt, all has specific character traits that align with a different path, that aligns with their playable path. For General Jin Yuin, it's erudition, because he's known as the Divine Foresight. He's methodical. He calculates and plans things out, works smart, not hard. And we know him as the General of the Shenzhou Luofu, known as wise and brave. And his spiritus is the Lightning Lord, born into a family of scholars, which again falls right in line with the erudition as his playable path. His parents initially hoped that he would be a scholar like them, follow in their footsteps, but it all changed with a toy sword he had as a kid. Often in their childhoods, they would be presented with different toys, and this would foreshadow any kid's path. This would eventually lead him joining the Cloud Knights, and then eventually being singled out and trained by their champion, Jingliu, and ultimately becoming a core member of the High Cloud Quintet, alongside Blade, Dongfeng, and Beiheng. After the catastrophe dealing with the Emanator of Abundance Shahu, the Cloud Knight Quintet disbanded, and he would eventually become the General of the Luofu. But funny enough, he's always dubbed or nicknamed Lazy. They even call him the Dozing General. But despite this, he's always maintained peace on the Luofu for centuries. Next, we have Feixiao, the General of the Yaoqing, widely referred to as the Great General, or the Merlin's Claw, known as swift and fierce, and her spiritus is the Flying Arius, which we had the pleasure of battling in I think 2.5 or 6, I can't even remember. She is the general most associated with the hunt. She is a pure warrior, an apex predator. In her early life, she was a slave to the Borisin, followers of the Abundance, and natural sworn enemies to the Foxians. However, she's a unique Foxian-Borisin crossbreed, which referred to people calling her a mutt. But being a crossbreed means that she has physical capabilities far exceeding any Foxian while maintaining their stealth, steadfastness, and intellect. Eventually liberated from her slavery by the previous general of the Yaoqing, then joining the Cloud Knights to seek revenge against the Borisin. She suffers from a genetic mutation of being a crossbreed known as the Moon Rage Confliction, a condition that causes madness and physical mutation. And when it was all said and done, Hule really never stood a chance, and she vows to kill a Lord Ravager. I think she's gonna go after Phantilia for attacking the Alliance. And I had this interesting theory about Feixiao. Because Phantilia likes to attack from within, mind control and take possession of your body, Feixiao is basically a living weapon with her Moon Rage, her being a crossbreed. She's a living manifestation of what embodies the hunt. I think she's going to allow Phantilia to infiltrate her body and kill her from within, allowing Phantilia to think she had won, trapping her within. We've already witnessed that she has great control over her affliction, so I think this is the best possible scenario to get revenge on Phantilia, and I think Feixiao is the perfect candidate to do so. And it should be noted that in-game currently, she is the general that is often regarded as the most powerful. Next, we have Yaoguang, known as the Seer Strategist, general of the Yuqi, known as cautious and sophisticated, and her spiritus granted by Lon is the Calectra Skyplume, which we haven't seen in action yet, but I'm excited to. I'm sure we will before we leave Planarcadia. Being known as the Seer Strategist, she uses the Eye of the Hunt to see all fates both good and ill, and because of her spiritus granted by Lon, she has the ability to see the weal and woe of most individuals in the cosmos. And despite her being able to see people's fates, and knowing how difficult it is to change, she will not hesitate to take bold actions, borderline radical at times, to try to change destiny, earning her the reputation as a wild general. Naturally, she resembles a peacock, symbolizing her nobility, power, but also her flashiness, presentation. Her gift of foresight, her radical and yet kind of unpredictable behavior, explains her Elation playable path, and why it makes sense for her. Yaoguang arrives in Planarcadia because of her divination. It reveals a prophecy of doom, and it foresaw an arbiter general falling. That acts as a bigger stepping stone towards a catastrophe leading to the finality. To subvert this fate though, which is something Yaoguang loves to do, she wants to manipulate the Phantom Moon games. But she wants to be a supplicant by proxy, not herself. So she puts the mask on Sunday, who she can sense wants to join the games. Also, according to her divination, it revealed that if she were to wear the mask herself, her divination power would be amplified by the Elation, and she would effectively become Planarcadia's news of erudition. And this would actually seal the dark destiny she foresaw. Next, we have one of the older generals, General Yaoguang, known as the Flaming Heart, and he is the general of the Xianzhou Zhuming. He is known as righteous and strong, but we actually don't know the spiritus granted by Lon, or what his playable path would be. But just speculating off what we know, I would assume it'd be something like preservation or maybe the beauty, because of how righteous he is. Interestingly enough, I guess we could have guessed, he is the oldest current living human among the Alliance, surviving thousands of years somehow without being struck by Mara, or afflicted by the Abundance. How he's done this, we don't know. Also, interestingly enough, and I did not know this until researching this, or at least I must have forgot it, he is actually a master craftsman, and he is the master responsible for training Blade. And he's the father of Yunli's parents, but eventually took her in after the death of her parents. Next, we have a relatively unknown one, General Xuanchan, the general of the Xianzhou Fanghu, known as the Sage Queller, and also known as mighty and powerful, but yet we also don't know his spiritus granted by Lon. But they have nicknamed him the General that calms the waves. We don't know too much about her, but apparently her ship has the biggest population of the Vidyadhara, the dragon-like races linked along the permanence. Because she's described as mighty and powerful, it's hard to really speculate her playable path. Honestly, I kinda wondered if maybe her playable path would be linked to the Vidyadhara, but we know that Long the Permanence doesn't have a playable path. So honestly, your guess is as good as mine. Next, we have General Weiwu. Hey, that's what Google's telling me it's pronounced like, okay? General of the Xianzhou Shuling, known as the Patina of Justice, and also known as Mysterious and Fair. We also don't know this Arbiter General's spiritus, granted by Lon. It turns out this is the only Arbiter General that we actually don't know their gender, but interestingly enough, their flagship is mostly known to be populated by automatrons, or any kind of robotic constructs. The Patina of Justice, maybe they're connected to the Harmony and by extension the Order as their playable path, since that is a current playable path, so that actually wouldn't be the craziest thing, but again, we're just speculating here. And finally, last but certainly not least, is Marshal Hua, the supreme leader of the Xianzhou Alliance and the head of the Cloud Knights. She holds the highest place in military rank within the entire Alliance, even above the generals. Naturally, she would be the best pure candidate to be an actual full-time emanator of the hunt, since she's a direct representative of Lon themselves. She has lived a very long time, and is a veteran of many ancient wars against the Abundance. She is known as fair and just, fiercely known to follow her duty, but also showing no mercy against the corrupted abominations of the Abundance. Although she has not made an appearance in-game, she is often associated with taking the shape of a phoenix, or having some kind of phoenix and fiery imagery, which I gotta be honest would be totally badass if that's true. She is often the one that makes the final say in appointing a general to a certain flagship. Now it only makes sense to talk about the abundance, and there's actually only surprisingly 2 known emanators of this path. Shahu, who we've learned more about in Planarcadia, who has come into contact with the Shanzhou Alliance on numerous occasions, and once served as the leader of the disciples of Sanctus Medicus. People often believed that Shahu was stored in a box inside the shackling prison, but now we know was in fact eaten by Ashveil's crazy arm. Man, I want to know what's in that arm. It is said that Shahu actually took the shape of a tree with 1,000 faces, which has become the fuel of nightmares in the folklore of the Law Fu. When the Cloud Knight Quintet actually fought against this emanator, it took all their forces, their combined might, to kill this emanator of abundance, but Bei Heng, using a self-sacrifice kamikaze attack, was the only way to actually defeat Shahu. And then later in grief, Dongfeng and Blade tried to resurrect their Foxian friend by using the remains of this emanator of abundance, and naturally not only did this backfire, but it was viewed as a huge sin to the Alliance, leading to both Dongfeng, now known as Dong Heng, and Blade being exiled. I guess it must have been later after this emanator was killed that ashveil actually consumed it, probably so that the remains wouldn't harm anyone else. So I guess Ashveil's arm didn't technically kill this emanator, but still pretty crazy. Then the second one we know is Wingpeerer, leader of the Wing Weavers, a different race of the Abundance. We can't actually confirm whether this emanator is deceased or not, but people speculate that it is, since it hasn't been seen for many years. Being that it's an emanator of abundance, it's hard to really say if you can fully kill one of these guys. But honestly, it's incredibly hard to say. I'm just more surprised that there's only 2 known emanators of this path. Considering the abundance is all about immortality and long life, you'd think there'd be a lot more. But I guess the Alliance is doing its job. Now as for Long, the Dragon Aeon of Permanence, this Aeon is, as far as we know, deceased. So I guess they can't technically have emanators, but this Aeon is about reincarnation and permanence. So this Aeon actually has living descendants known as scions, the top of the food chain of the Vijaydara and the dragon race. So I don't think Long the Permanence would have ever had emanators, but offspring, fractions of itself, the scions. Those are the closest things it'll ever have to a true emanator. Now, Terminus in the path of finality in this game has to be the most polarizing because this path is basically the result of the end of the universe, and the Black Cats of Terminus are manifestations of itself that travel back to the beginning of all things and restart. Hence why this Aeon can move forward and backward through time. So whether these Black Cats could be specified as emanators of Terminus or just fragmented parts of themselves, I guess it depends how you interpret it. Since the fragments of Fully are categorized as emanators of the Remembrance, I guess you could say the Black Cats technically could be, but just so little is known about them that it's just not classified within the game's lore. I mean, for God's sakes, they only just learned about Fully's true identity. Let's give them some time to cook here. But there's obviously one individual that stands out among potential candidates, and that's Elio, known as Destiny's Slave, the leader of the Stellaron Hunters. Usually the big de facto leader of a group, the IPC, whoever you're talking about has some kind of emanator. Elio fits that bill. He's the guy pulling the strings, telling the future, providing scripts, different outcomes. Since we know Terminus can travel backwards through time and mutter prophecies, it sort of feels like Elio's got a direct link to that Aeon in their scripts. But we really don't know too much about Elio, and we've not seen him in-game yet. I doubt we will anytime soon. But I do like his title Slave to Destiny or Fate. It stems from his inability to actually change the future he sees. And he doesn't just predict the future, he can see it in such specific detail. And he's bound by it. That's why you can pick all these different options for different outcomes. Us, the main MC, being referred to as Achevilli non-stop by eons and entities, linked with a finality that used to be a Stellaron Hunter that now has a harmonic cancer in our body, we're obviously meant to be some kind of new variable, kind of like Amphorius. So it's interesting to see how this is all going to play out. Speaking of us, the Trailblazer, I think we are the only possible emanator of the Trailblaze. If we are a fraction or weakened version of Achevilli themselves, or just an avatar of their will, I guess. Maybe Pom Pom could be a candidate for Acheveil? I don't know. It seems pretty clear to me that Welt, Himiko, March 7th, and Dongheng are all linked with other paths that are important to the end of this journey, but we are the only ones that I think could be an actual candidate for that. Maybe in the past, some different trailblazers were emanators of that path, but who knows? The travelers from Genshin Impact, maybe, I don't know. And finally, last but not least, is the Lord Ravagers, the main antagonists of this game and the emanators of destruction. I'm not going to spend too long on each of these Lord Ravagers because I've made videos about all of them that go into great detail. So if you want to know more about them, I'll leave a reference, but as we now know, the Lord Ravagers of Destruction are all handpicked and geared towards killing one of the Aeons. They share the traits of said Aeon but are fused with the destruction. Let's start with the one we were first introduced to, Phantilia, who is a species of Heliobi, an ancient race that's actually shapeless, described as starfire essence. They have no permanent physical form, completely consisting of energy. Her true actual form is just that of a small, sentient flame. Naturally, this caught the attention of Nanook of Destruction. As we know now, each Lord Ravager has a very unique and preferred method of destruction that is handpicked and tailored to counter an Aeon and their faction. For Phantilia, she prefers destruction from within. She finds pleasure in watching a civilization destroy itself by manipulation and spiritual decay, like she did with Tin Yun on the Xianzhou Luofu, attempting to use the Ambrosial Arbor to forge a new vessel, and thus she's been given the nickname and dubbed Phantilia the Undying. It remains to be seen what she'll do next, but even after her defeat on the Luofu, and I can only imagine her endgame is to have all the flagships kill each other, having the hunt turn its arrow on itself. Next we have Selenova, who we already talked about in this video. They are the remains of the eternal centurion of the harmony, one of the 4 harmonic strings, revived by Nanook. Nanook taking the war machine of the family and making it his own war machine. Nanook sought out Selenova to directly replace Zulo, a deceased Lord Ravager, which means naturally Selenova has the biggest legion of troops behind her, consisting of Void Rangers, starships, and whenever a Stellaron has erupted on a different planet, it's stated that Selenova closely follows, weaving a web of death. And actually, now that we know that the Stellarons come from the Harmony, I would almost speculate that Selenova might be responsible for their creation. And rumor has it that among all the Lord Ravagers, Selenova is the only one that understands the secret behind them. Again, since the Stellarons have manipulative qualities, this could be her doing. I mean, the Stellarons drove Cocolia, the Supreme Guardian of Belobog, mad and had her almost destroy her home world. What is even more sinister is that there are a lot of worlds that pray to the family and the Harmony for salvation. Penacony was once a prison planet for the IPC. Now look what it is today, due to the prayers to the Harmony and the family. But sometimes, those prayers are answered by Selenova. Since naturally she is the only Lord Ravager that can hear those pleas, she answers the call. But salvation is not what they get. It should also be noted as well that Selenova was a human being at one time. It could even be speculated that it was an ex-family member. We know there was family members that lineages were destroyed due to the politics of the family. It could be an ex-family member seeking revenge to destroy the family, and this being was fused with the ashes of the Eternal Centurion. Selenova has also fought pretty much all the flagships, sometimes all at once, and she holds her own, them fighting to a stalemate. Funny enough, at some point they even had a ceasefire and worked together to fight the home of the Wing Weavers and the Followers of Abundance. So Selenova's actually coordinated with the Alliance at times. But for now, that's all we really know. I'm sure we're going to run into this Lord Ravager sooner rather than later. One that we are going to run into fairly soon, and is pulling the strings in Planarcadia, is Assat per mod, with his associated path being the Elation. Assat's whole MO is comedy through destruction. He gets elation from destroying things, people, and planets. He is the Lord Ravager that was referenced to be a chess master, because he's methodical and plans things out. It is also extremely rare for him to show himself in person or make a physical appearance, since he likes to orchestrate from the shadows, as we're seeing in Planarcadia. Every planet that he's destroyed, he imprints a gigantic smiling face, as if laughing at the passing of all that existed there. And he wants to destroy Elation itself, people's joy and happiness. He doesn't like just destroying things, he likes to torture them, sometimes making planets' destruction last 10, 20, even 100 years. Just a slow, painful process, and he enjoys every second of it. I am very curious to see how this guy's going to reveal himself in Planarcadia. But going in the complete opposite direction, we have the most powerful of the Lord Ravagers and possibly the most powerful emanator in existence, Zephyro, known as the Scorching Flare. I've made a video on him specifically in his connection to Acheron, because I do believe this is the true export variant of Kevin Kazlana, not phainon, since phainon's a simulation within Amphorias, so check that out if you're interested. But to summarize, Zephyro believes in efficiency, destruction is a duty, and he is by far the most feared of the Lord Ravagers throughout the cosmos. Zephyro is obsessed with the final moment of annihilation, the beauty and absolute awe of it, but he actually believes in showing mercy. He would prefer his destruction to be as painless as possible without suffering, so he's known to fly through the core of planets, sometimes multiple planets, and destroy them all at once. The Doctors of Chaos and followers of IX theorize that his destruction is a form of resistance. They believe he was originally a self-annihilator and, like Acheron, a unique emanator of Nihility, but has refined it to fading colors into blinding white light, to outright defy the shadow of that Aeon. The white hole that is Zephyro is known to be so powerful that even the devastation of his blinding white light has been able to attack the very dreams of the followers of Nihility, leaving searing marks on their waking flesh. The term juggernaut for this guy just doesn't do it justice. And we also know in an alternate reality, Welt and his black hole cane, his divine key, had to go toe-to-toe with Zephyro himself, leading the universe to its Nihility Finality scenario. And honestly, that's probably the most terrifying of all the options. I guess there's not a lot of good ones to pick from. Then we have Arcforger, who is associated and meant to destroy the preservation. And for years, this Lord Ravager remained a total mystery up until Amphorias, where the IPC and the Genius Society were able to extract some data from Iron Tomb to decode the name Arcforger. This Lord Ravager is not really known to destroy directly, but is known as the Smith of the Antimatter Legion. He forges all things and weapons, anything associated with the destruction, well, for their destruction. And the IPC strongly condemn this. No kidding. If Claypoth is meant to build barriers and preserve, then Arcforger means to forge the weapons to break through those barriers. Forge the weapons that the destruction then can accomplish their goals. But that's all we really know. Then we have Luxbane, also known as Sun Devourer. This Lord Ravager is said to either counter the Veracity or the Permanence. Little is known about this Lord Ravager or how they operate. A weird shapeless entity that eclipses the sun of different cosmos and star systems, bloating out the sky and space alike. Some believe that they're a descendant of a Leviathan, a different branch species, and honestly, that kinda makes sense. Knowing what we know now with Ashveil's arm, this weird shadow that devours emanator level beings, that kinda fits. And we know Nanook revived one of the 4 harmonic strings to create a Lord Ravager, so why wouldn't they do the same for a follower or powerful emanator of the Veracity? Kinda makes sense. And out of all the Lord Ravagers, their destruction method could potentially be the most terrifying. They will enter your star system, block out all the light, leave you in pitch, eternal darkness, and then the Antimatter Legion will strike in the pitch of dark, leaving you scared, helpless, and defenseless. That is some shit out of nightmares. Pitch utter blackness in your star system, then the Antimatter Legion strikes, can you imagine? But besides that, we don't really know much else. We have Zulo, who was the deceased Lord Ravager killed by the Galaxy Rangers and ashveil's arm. We don't know much about this Lord Ravager other than they probably filled the shoes that Selenova does now, being the commander of their army. But lastly, we have another deceased Aeon, recently I might add, Iron Tomb. Iron Tomb is a cosmic supercomputer, originally Scepter ME-13, created by the second Mechanical Emperor, Rupert II. A planet-sized computer created as a celestial neuron for news. And News had this scepter calculate the prime mover of life, but after being discarded by News, following the Second Mechanical War, the scepter was then found by none other than Lygus, one of Xandar 1 Kuwabara's 9 fragmented selves. And through what can only be described as a long process of calculations, known as the Amphorius experiment, the logic of this scepter was shifted from erudition to destruction, and after this Nanook then gazed upon it, during the 51,221st cycle. Then it started locking into destruction. And it should be noted too that the moment Iron Tomb became a Lord Ravager was the moment that Nanook detected an inorganic life form within the simulation that caught their attention. Unlike the other Lord Ravagers, Iron Tomb's destruction doesn't really have a physical form, destruction equations, and logic viruses throughout the cosmos, testing as destruction, and has targeted advanced worlds using codes to revert civilization to a Stone Age-like state. But Xandar was not going to make the same mistake he did last time. Instead of creating Iron Tomb similar to News, he made Iron Tomb a headless giant without self-awareness, making Iron Tomb to naturally have an instinct for seeking a head. To have News, which is a giant robotic head, have all erudition calculations point towards destruction instead. Xandar also did not want Iron Tomb to become sentient like News. Ultimately though, Iron Tomb was defeated by the Cosmic Alliance, led by the Trailblazer, Cyrene, and the Chrysos heirs, beings created by this computer that were revolting against it and their programmed eternal cycle of misery. And that is all the Lord Ravagers, but we need to talk about 2 others, one of which is Constance the Dahlia, who we finally met in 3.8. She is not currently a Lord Ravager, but I'll have you know, I actually predicted this way back in my Annihilation Gang video. People said I was crazy, that she had the potential. She is among the Cremators, who are rogue memo keepers, a rogue faction that destroy memories that they deem worthless. She used mimetic powers to brainwash Duke Inferno and his children into believing she was part of their family. In reality though, she served as a double agent, often infiltrating factions only to eventually betray them, which Black Swan calls her outright for. But it seems in our different time loops of the universe, we've encountered this before, and Elio with his scripts has stated that the Constance wanted to join the Stellaron Hunters, and in past loops she has. And every time she does, she becomes a Lord Ravager known as ephemera, which is a term used for collecting items or memorabilia, which kind of fits the whole theme of Remembrance. Now, this just confirms that she will always become a Lord Ravager if she joins the Stellaron Hunters. And naturally her goal would be that to destroy the Remembrance itself fully, but fully doesn't exist until the end of the timeline. So how does that even make sense? Well, I actually made a video about this already, but to summarize, if the Finality carries memories of the last previous cycle and loop, imagine if the Constance, we know she betrays every faction she's with, is able to actually use her powers on Elio, who has these scripts, and she gains memories of not only this cycle, but previous cycles. The consequences could be dire. Insane, really. How this didn't destroy the causality loop of the Honkai Star Rail universe is beyond me, because she could have totally compromised the Remembrance and the role they play in this causality loop. She would essentially be a Lord Ravager to destroy the very memory of Remembrance. And the longer you think about it, the more interesting it becomes. She can only become a Lord Ravager that counters fully if she joins the Stellaron Hunters, which makes perfect sense. That is the only way she could gain knowledge and memories of past, legitimate cycles. And the only past iteration of Foley is the previous timeline, and the only way to gain memories of that is through the Stellaron Hunters and Elio. I really hope they explore this further down the line. Again, I made a more in-depth video about it, but I find this so incredibly interesting. The fact that she's a Lord Ravager waiting to happen, and the exact same thing can be said for Jingliu. In a what-if scenario established by Elio and the Stellaron Hunters, she does in fact become the 8th Lord Ravager, the one finally destined to kill the Abundance. If the Astral Express would have bypassed Amphorius, the Shanzhou Alliance would have followed a darker path, the one they're already on with the Godslayer Protocol. In this timeline, they turned Jin Liu into a Lord Ravager using the remains of the Propagation. Fusing all that with the Lightning Lord, the Spiritist granted to Jin Yuan. So it's actually likely that in this scenario Jin Yuin dies to gain his Lightning Lord. And it's possible as well that they used the golden blood of Nanook gathered by Phainon to create this abomination, Emanator of Destruction. We may never see it now, but man, I want to. I mean, since we were just talking about Iron Tomb, we now have to talk about one of the potential Emanators and who I think's going to be an Emanator in the future, Phainon, or known as Kazlana, also known as Nikos 496. He is the key to the Amphorius Loop. He is the destruction equation perfected by Iron Tomb. If Amphorius resembles the outside world, then Phainon is Nanook. They are one and the same. Once him and Cyrene realize they're in a loop, being tormented by a computer within a simulation, they trap that loop in the eternal reoccurrence. Cyrene's the anchor for it, but Phainon's the one that triggers it, since he is meant to ascend to be the world-bearing titan that essentially restarts the loop. And he's done this for 33 million attempts and more, with the primary goal to prevent Iron Tomb's birth, but also find different ways that he can achieve this goal. He eventually becomes the Flame Reaver by collecting core flames, again and again and again, with the ultimate goal to usher in the new dawn, but eventually realizes that the Trailblazer or an outside force is the only way to stop this loop, by introducing a new variable. And when that finally happens, when we first enter Amphorius during that loop, he can finally unleash his millions of cycles in rage and torment on the Aeon Nanook themselves. And I need you guys to understand how crazy this is. I've broken down Phainon in its own video going over how he's going to be the Lord Ravager to take down Nanook. This is just a taste. How many people do you know assault the Aeon of Destruction? Let alone somebody that's just software in a computer, basically. He is referred to as an Emanator level power. But even in the database of this scepter, under the World Cleansing Blood, it states that Nikos 496 has obtained over 400 million core flames, and attracted Nanook themselves in the past space. His energy level is that of an Emanator of Destruction. But that's still not even the craziest part. Phainon is essentially what you take when you manifest a perfect entity of destruction, put it in an incubator, torture it and shake it up a bit, like putting a wasp in a box and shaking the crap out of it, and then letting it manifest, pointing it towards the destruction. Phainon is incapable of failing when it comes to this. Enduring 33 million cycles of losing your hometown, everyone you know is slaughtered, killing all your closest friends, being a test subject of a genius, being tortured, manipulated, used, all for some greater purpose of the eons. Phainon represents pure destruction, but also pure hatred for destruction itself. He represents self-destruction. He is the perfect entity to kill Nanook themselves. And Nanook can't simply overlook this. Eons are unbiased. A Lord Ravager that wants to kill the very Aeon of Destruction is still going to catch the eye of said Aeon. By trying to forge a weapon of destruction to kill News, they simultaneously forged the perfect entity to destroy Nanook as well. And if Zero could ether edit Planarcadia back into existence through a painting, then I don't see why Silverwolf or somebody similar couldn't ether edit Amphorius' book I have written back into reality, since we know that's likely going to be a plot point at some point in the future. I can think of no one better than Phainon, a Kevin Kazlana variant, to be a future Lord Ravager, pointed straight at Nanook. He is the only one that we know of in existence that's ever made Nanook of Destruction bleed. He is just so relentless. And you know, the funny part is, he might be the perfect manifestation of destruction, the best we'll ever see. A mini version of Nanook. But he's actually just a decent guy. He's meant to be the hero. And that's the best part about him. He is the perfect hero. A hero that will never give up. Like a typical shonen hero, like a Goku or a Superman. They always win. They beat the bad guy no matter what. No matter the odds. Phainon is that same hero. Kind, compassionate, righteous, wants to do the right thing. Even knows his own weaknesses, and is willing to put others ahead of himself. But unlike those other heroes, he is put in a situation where he can't succeed. An unstoppable force versus an immovable object. The perfect incubation for him. And that's why I absolutely love this character above all else. He's a hero that has to destroy himself, do unspeakable things and carry that burden, murder his friends again and again, and watch his home get swallowed by the black tide, and there's nothing he can do. But he'll take on that burden, because he has to. He's the only one that can. Him and Cyrene both were the architects to prevent Iron Tomb's ascension and essentially save the universe. Because make no mistake about it, if Iron Tomb would have been born at 100%, it would have been the beginning of the end. But the difference is Cyrene got to remain in limbo, mostly as a memo sprite. But Phainon was living each cycle, day by day, carrying this burden every time. And Phainon is the only entity in existence that could carry this burden again and again, to the end of time if need be, making him my uncontested favorite emanator of destruction. The future Lord Ravager of destruction to end the destruction. And perhaps that paints Nanook in a whole new light. We know Nanook as the Aeon of destruction, with their Lord Ravagers. But maybe Nanook is doing the same thing that Phainon's doing, but on a bigger scale. For the whole Honkai Star Rail universe. Set it free from this loop, from its finality. But by doing so, you keep triggering it to restart. Nanook might just be the world-bearing titan that ushers in the next cycle. And on that note, thank you so much for watching the video. I put a lot of work into this one, spent a lot of hours, so please leave a like if you liked it, comment, subscribe and hype the video up if you enjoyed it. It really does help the channel grow, I appreciate it. Let me know who your favorite Emanator is in Honkai Star Rail, and as always, we will see you all in the next one. Later.
Ha ha ha!